He was just a barefoot boy from Texas until the world called him to war. Before the medals, before the parades, before history carved his name into stone, there was hunger, loss, and a child who refused to surrender. This is where the legend of Audie Murphy truly begins. Texas in the 1920s was a place of wide skies and hard lives. Fields of cotton stretched to the horizon, and poverty hung heavy in the air. In a small wooden house near Kingston on June 20th, 1925, a frail newborn entered the world. He was one of 12 children born to Emmett and Josie Bell Murphy, poor sharecroppers fighting the dust and debt of the Great Depression. From the very start, life demanded everything from him. There were no silver spoons, only calloused hands and empty plates. The boy's cradle was the earth and his lullaby, the wind that swept across the plains. Audie grew up watching his parents struggle to feed so many mouths. His father drifted from job to job, chasing wages that never seemed to last. His mother, gentle but strong, held the family together with faith and sheer will. She taught her children kindness, even when the world offered none. By the time Audie could walk, he worked. By 10, he was ploughing fields beside grown men. By 12, he had become the family hunter and provider. A single-shot rifle slung over his shoulder, he'd disappear into the woods, chasing rabbits and squirrels to fill the pot. Each bullet had to count. That precision would one day save lives on a battlefield far from Texas soil. School was a luxury. He made it only to the 5th grade before dropping out to earn pennies picking cotton. He was shy, quiet, almost invisible in crowds. Neighbors saw only a small boy with sad eyes, but inside burned something fierce. Duty. When his father finally walked away from the family, Audie, barely 13, became the man of the house. He promised his mother he'd look after the younger children. He meant it. Every dawn he rose to work, every dusk he hunted to feed them. Those were the years that forged his spirit, tough, proud, unbreakable. Then came 1941. The world beyond Texas was on fire. Europe was collapsing under the weight of tyranny, and on December 7th, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. America was at war. Audie was 16. He heard the news on a crackling radio and felt something stir inside him, a calling. He looked around at the poverty, the dust, the hopelessness, and thought, maybe the army's my way out. Maybe I can finally do something that matters. He walked to the nearest recruiting station, ready to fight for his country. But the Marine Corps looked at his small frame, 5'5", 110 pounds, and shook their heads. Too young. Too little, they said. The Navy said the same. Even the paratroopers turned him away. But rejection never broke him. It only sharpened his resolve. He waited a few months, trained his body, worked the fields harder, shot straighter, ate whatever protein he could find. When his 17th birthday arrived, his sister Corinne helped him falsify his birth certificate, changing 16 to 18. It was a small lie born from a great dream. On June 30th, 1942, the U.S. Army accepted him. Private Audie Murphy became Soldier Audie Murphy. He was assigned to the 15th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Infantry Division, an ordinary recruit who would soon perform extraordinary deeds. Basic training began at Camp Walters, Texas. The heat was merciless. Drill sergeants barked orders until voices went hoarse. Most recruits collapsed under exhaustion. But the little Texan refused to quit. They teased him. "Hey, runt, the rifle's bigger than you." Yet day after day he outshot, outran, and outlasted them all. He was a natural marksman, his aim honed by those years hunting supper in the woods. He hit targets others missed. He moved silent, quick, deliberate. One instructor wrote in his report, "Small but lethal, determined beyond measure." After months of training, the Army shipped him overseas. Destination, North Africa, the gateway to the European War. For many young Americans, the voyage across the Atlantic was their first glimpse of the vastness of the world. For Audie, it was the first time he felt equal to anyone. He wasn't the poor kid anymore. He was a soldier among soldiers. Still, seasickness, fear, and the unknown gnawed at him. He prayed quietly on the deck, looking at the endless waves. He didn't yet know that within 3 years, he'd return home with every major combat decoration his country could give. North Africa had already seen fierce fighting. By the time Murphy arrived, the campaign was winding down, but soon his division prepared for the invasion of Sicily, the start of his baptism by fire. In July 1943, Allied forces stormed the island. For Audie, it was chaos. Artillery thunder, smoke, confusion, the sickening whistle of bullets. The boy from Texas had entered hell. At first he was cautious, terrified even. Then training took over. He moved low, aimed steady, and returned fire with uncanny precision. Combat hardened him fast. He watched friends fall and learned that fear is not the enemy, hesitation is. In Sicily, he earned his first recognition for valor. During a fierce firefight, when his unit was pinned by machine gun fire, Audie crawled forward alone, tossing grenades into the enemy nest and clearing it. For that act, he received his first Bronze Star. It wouldn't be his last. He was promoted to corporal, then sergeant, each step earned in blood and grit. By 19, he'd become a battle-tested soldier, leading men twice his size and age. Those men learned quickly that little Texas never backed down. After Sicily came Italy. The campaign there was brutal. Mountains, rain, mud, and endless enemy resistance. At Salerno at Anzio, the 3rd Division fought yard by yard. Audie endured months of artillery barrages and sleepless nights. He was wounded by shrapnel, but refused evacuation. When a comrade was hit, he carried him to safety under fire. His courage wasn't loud, it was quiet, relentless. He fought not for glory, but for the men beside him, the only family he had left on that side of the world. Back home, tragedy struck. His mother, Josie Belle Murphy, the anchor of his soul, passed away in May 1941, just before he shipped out. He never got to say goodbye. The army telegram reached him months later. He didn't cry. Soldiers rarely did. But something inside him hardened. He wrote in his diary, "She'll never know what I become. Maybe that's best." From that day forward, Audie fought for 2 families, the one he lost and the one he led. In the cold winter of 1943, his company dug into defensive positions near the Italian town of Anzio. They endured 90 consecutive days of combat, constant shelling, no rest, disease spreading through the trenches. Rats, mud, and fear were daily companions. Yet Murphy remained calm. When others broke down, he encouraged them quietly, "Keep your head down, we'll see another sunrise." He earned another Bronze Star and the respect of every man in his platoon. His superiors noted, "He leads by example, never asks of others what he won't do himself." The army promoted him again, Staff Sergeant Audie Murphy. Not bad for a kid once deemed too small to fight. As 1944 dawned, victory in Italy seemed close. But new orders came. The 3rd Division was moving to southern France for Operation Dragoon, the next Allied invasion. Audie's war was far from over. He would soon meet the battles that would define his legacy. On the transport ship heading north, he stood on deck staring at the dark waves. The wind whipped his uniform and he whispered, "If I die, let it count for something." The boy from Texas had grown into a warrior. But deep down he was still that same quiet kid, fighting for survival, fighting for meaning, fighting because someone had to. Before France, he was already a hero in the eyes of his comrades. But history had not yet seen the full measure of his courage. France would change everything. There, amid vineyards and villages torn by war, Audie Murphy would rise from soldier to legend. And though this chapter ends with the thunder of ships crossing the Mediterranean, his story, his true test of valor, was only just beginning. From the dusty fields of Texas to the beaches of Sicily, he carried with him one truth. You don't need size to stand tall, you don't need privilege to matter, and you don't need glory to be great. He was just a boy from Texas, but destiny was already calling his name. He was no longer just the poor boy from Texas. He was now Private Audie Leon Murphy, serial number 180-83707, belonging to the United States Army. But in 1943, standing on the decks of the ship bound for North Africa, Audie Murphy still looked like a child, 18 years old, weighing barely 112 pounds, and staring at an endless sea that separated him from everything he knew. The war was about to test him in ways no training ever could. The first time he smelled cordite, he didn't flinch. The first time he heard artillery scream overhead, he ducked low and learned fast. Murphy was assigned to Company B, 1st Battalion, 15th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Infantry Division, a battle-hardened unit already bloodied in North Africa. For him, it was the real beginning. The long voyage ended in Oran, Algeria, and from there the men trained for the invasion of Sicily. War had a rhythm, days of boredom, seconds of terror. Murphy learned the sound of enemy mortars the way a farmer knows the wind. He listened, calculated, and moved before the shells hit. The older men started to notice the boy had instincts, and when the invasion of Sicily began in July 1943, Murphy stepped into his first combat. He moved through the rocky hills near Palermo, rifle tight against his shoulder. The heat was suffocating, and the smell of gunpowder hung over the island. Enemy fire came from the high ground. Every step forward was paid for in blood. Murphy's first confirmed kill came quietly. He spotted a German machine gun nest, pinning down his platoon. Without orders, he crawled forward, tossed a grenade and silenced it. The explosion echoed through the canyon and the men advanced. It was a small victory, but it planted something deep inside him, confidence and the understanding that courage meant acting before fear could take hold. After Sicily, the division prepared for Italy, the toughest campaign of the war. Murphy's company landed near Salerno, where the beaches were drenched in chaos. The sea turned red, and the air vibrated with machine gun chatter. The boy who had once picked cotton in Texas now fought amid shattered ruins older than his country. The terrain was cruel, mountains, mud, and endless rain. The Germans defended every ridge like it was Berlin itself. Murphy fought through malaria, exhaustion, and the loss of friends. He carried more weight than he had ever known, yet never slowed. It was there he learned a soldier's truth. The line between bravery and survival was razor thin. He watched leaders fall, replacements arrive, and whole platoons vanish overnight. But Audie kept moving forward. By early 1944, his reputation had begun to spread quietly through the regiment. They called him small but deadly. He never bragged, never hesitated. He studied terrain, memorized enemy positions, and carried himself with an intensity that seemed older than his years. One cold morning outside the Italian village of Mignano, Murphy volunteered for reconnaissance. Crawling through the underbrush, he spotted German artillery hidden behind a stone wall. He radioed coordinates, and American guns answered. Within minutes, smoke and fire rose from the hillside. His report saved dozens of lives. For that, he earned a Bronze Star. He said nothing about it, simply cleaned his weapon and prepared for the next mission. Later that winter, during the assault on Mount Rotondo, Murphy's company was pinned down by snipers. He crawled toward the ridge through mud so thick it swallowed boots. Lying flat, he picked off the hidden shooters one by one until the path cleared. When the men reached the top, they found the enemy trench empty except for spent cartridges and the bodies Murphy had left behind. He was 19. For that, he received a promotion to sergeant, but medals meant little. Murphy wrote home sparingly, never telling his family what he'd seen. Instead, his letters were full of humor, thin paper shields against the darkness growing around him. In May 1944 came Anzio, the Crucible. The Allies were stuck on the beachhead for months under constant bombardment. Sleep was a rumor. Death was routine. Murphy's unit fought tooth and nail just to hold their sector. One afternoon, while leading his squad to reinforce a weak flank, Murphy was grazed by enemy shrapnel. He refused evacuation. Blood soaked his sleeve, but he stayed until the line stabilized. For that, he earned a Purple Heart and a quiet respect from his men that could not be written in citations. When Rome finally fell in June, Murphy walked among the ruins, not in triumph, but in exhaustion. He had seen too many names carved into temporary crosses. That summer, orders came. The 3rd Division would spearhead the invasion of southern France, Operation Dragoon. Murphy boarded another landing craft, this time as a seasoned combat veteran. He had survived North Africa, Sicily, and Italy, but France would make him immortal. On August 15, 1944, his boat hit the coast near Ramatuelle. As he leapt into chest-high water, bullets sliced the surf. He waded ashore, rifle raised, shouting for his men to move forward. The enemy fired from terraced vineyards above the beach. Murphy's instincts kicked in. He flanked left, crawled up a ravine and surprised a German machine gun position from behind. 3 grenades later, the hillside was silent. Company B advanced. That day became the opening chapter of his legend, but what followed sealed it. 2 days later, near the town of Ramatuelle, the Germans counterattacked. Murphy and his men took cover behind a low wall. As machine gun fire pinned them, Murphy crawled closer to the source. A friend beside him was hit. Something inside Audie snapped, not in rage, but in cold precision. He rose to his knees, emptied his carbine, and grabbed a captured enemy weapon. He advanced alone, bullets slicing past. By the time his men caught up, he had killed or wounded more than 20 enemy soldiers and captured the rest. For that, he was recommended for the Distinguished Service Cross, the second highest military honor. When his commander congratulated him, Murphy simply said, "They were killing my friends." By September, Murphy was a staff sergeant and a living symbol of American grit. He'd been wounded again, shrapnel in the hip, but returned to duty within days. Each time he refused rest. He told medics, "My outfit needs me." The 3rd Division pushed north through the Rhone Valley, liberating town after town. Civilians waved flags and offered wine, but Murphy stayed alert. He had seen too many ambushes to celebrate early. Near Montélimar, his platoon encountered a German convoy retreating under heavy guard. Murphy set up his men along the ridge and coordinated fire. When enemy tanks appeared, he called in artillery with pinpoint accuracy. The convoy disintegrated under the barrage. When silence returned, his men found Murphy leaning on his rifle, expression unreadable. He said quietly, "Let's move out." By now, Audie Murphy was famous within the 3rd Division, though he never sought fame. Reporters wrote about the baby-faced killer, but his comrades knew the truth. He wasn't chasing glory. He was chasing survival, and perhaps redemption for those who never made it home. As autumn settled over France, the division approached the Vosges Mountains, a forested nightmare where the Germans dug in deep. It was cold, wet, and merciless. Here, Murphy would earn the Silver Star not once but twice. The first came when he single-handedly captured an enemy machine gun nest that had stalled his company S advance. The second came days later, when he led his squad across open ground under direct fire to rescue a trapped platoon. He moved like a shadow through the mist, bullets snapping past his head. Each action saved lives, each medal cost pieces of his soul. December 1944. The war's final fury gathered in the Ardennes, the Battle of the Bulge. But while the snow fell there, Murphy's division fought in the freezing forests near Holzwihr. Exhaustion was universal. Men's boots froze to their feet. Food was scarce. The Germans launched counterattacks daily, trying to break the line. Murphy, now a lieutenant, had seen more combat than most generals. He was 20. His face carried years no clock could measure. The night before a major assault, he wrote in his diary, "I feel like an old man. My friends are gone. I keep fighting, but I don't know why, except that someone has to." When dawn came, he led his platoon through fog thicker than smoke. They captured a farmhouse, used it as cover, and prepared for the inevitable counterattack. When it came hard. Tanks, infantry, mortars. The earth trembled. Murphy's men looked to him, and he stood firm. He moved from foxhole to foxhole, shouting orders, steadying nerves. When ammunition ran low, he redistributed it. When men faltered, he lifted them up. Hours later, when the attack finally broke, he walked the field alone among the fallen. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he whispered, "God help us all." As 1944 turned to 1945, the war was nearing its end, but Murphy's defining moment was yet to come. In late January, near Holzwihr, France, his unit would face overwhelming odds. He would stand alone on a burning tank destroyer, command his men to fall back, and hold off an entire German company for nearly an hour. It would earn him the Medal of Honor and immortality. But that is a story for the next chapter. For now, picture him walking through the snow-choked woods of eastern France, rifle across his shoulder, eyes fixed ahead. He had entered the war as a boy. He now carried the weight of nations, This was the making of a legend, not in the halls of glory, but in mud, smoke, and sacrifice. Every medal on his chest was paid for with blood, sometimes his, often someone else's. Audie Murphy had stepped fully into the fire, and the fire had forged him into steel. In the next part of this journey, the flames will burn hotter still, because the day he earned the Medal of Honor was the day he defied death itself.
He had seen war in every color of its cruelty. The black smoke of artillery, the red mist of wounds, the gray eyes of dying friends. But nothing compared to what waited in the frozen woods of eastern France in January 1945. Audie Murphy was 20 years old. A lieutenant now, battle-scarred, haunted, and tired beyond his years. He had already earned every major U.S. combat decoration except one. But fate was not done testing him yet. The 15th Infantry Regiment dug into the Vosges forest, holding a defensive line near the tiny village of Holtzwihr. For weeks, the Germans had been trying to push through. They came in waves, desperate, relentless, fanatical. Murphy's company was exhausted. The replacements were green, barely trained, and terrified. Supplies were low, morale lower. But he refused to show weakness. He walked the line each morning, nodding to his men, cracking small jokes just to keep them grounded. They followed him not because of rank, but because he was one of them. On January 26, 1945, dawn broke quiet and gray. Snow blanketed the ground, muffling every sound. Then came the low growl of engines. German armor was approaching, a formation of tanks and infantry and perhaps 200 men, moving straight toward Murphy's position. He ordered his company to dig in deeper. The ground was frozen solid. Shovels hit ice. They braced for impact. By 10 a.m., the first shells began to fall. Trees exploded into splinters. The earth shook. Machine guns roared from the hills. Murphy's radio crackled. Reinforcements were hours away. They were on their own. When a shell hit nearby, his field phone went dead. Another shell struck a U.S. tank destroyer positioned behind his men. The vehicle burst into flames. Fuel hissed and ignited, turning the clearing into a furnace. Murphy's command post was nearly overrun. He ordered his men to withdraw to a tree line behind the road. "Fall back and set up a new defense," he shouted. Then, instead of retreating himself, he stayed. He looked at the burning tank destroyer. Its .50 caliber machine gun was still mounted and loaded. The fire was spreading fast. Ammunition inside the vehicle would soon cook off. But to Murphy, it wasn't a death trap. It was a last stand. He climbed onto the flaming wreck. Snow melted beneath his boots. Bullets snapped past his head. He swung the heavy machine gun toward the advancing enemy and opened fire. The sound tore through the winter air, the deep, hammering rhythm of a .50 cal echoing off the hills. German infantry dropped where they stood. Murphy shifted fire from left to right, cutting down entire squads that tried to flank him. When a tank turret turned toward him, he aimed at the open hatch and squeezed the trigger. The tank stopped moving. He was one man against an army. A soldier watching from the tree line later said, "It looked like he was possessed. He stood on that burning tank like it was his own battlefield throne." For nearly an hour, Murphy held the line alone. Smoke and flames surrounded him. Enemy bullets tore through his uniform. He radioed artillery coordinates while firing, directing American shells just yards from his own position. When the tank destroyer's ammo finally began to explode, shrapnel whistled through the air. Still, he stayed. When his gun jammed, he cleared it. When his ammo ran low, he aimed with deadly precision, every burst counting. Finally, when silence began to fall, Murphy realized the enemy had stopped advancing. The German assault was broken. Bodies lay scattered across the field. Nearly 50 enemy soldiers dead, dozens more wounded. Smoke drifted over the snow like a fog of ghosts. Murphy climbed down from the wreckage, half deaf, trembling, covered in soot and blood. He limped back to his men, voice hoarse, eyes distant. "Let's counterattack," he said, and they did. He led them forward, retaking the lost ground. because that's what leaders do. When the day ended, the field belonged to the 3rd Division once again. For his actions near Holtzwihr, Audie Murphy would receive the Medal of Honor, the highest recognition for valor in the United States Armed Forces. The official citation read, "Second Lieutenant Murphy's indomitable courage and his refusal to give an inch of ground saved his company from possible encirclement and destruction." When the medal was pinned to his chest later that year, Murphy said quietly, "The real heroes are the ones who never came back." He meant every word, but medals couldn't hide the toll. Murphy had been wounded 3 times. He had watched more friends die than most men ever know. He was 21 and already carried the weight of a lifetime. The Army sent him home in June 1945, just weeks after victory in Europe. But leaving the battlefield didn't mean leaving the war. The real battle, the one that would never end, was just beginning. When he stepped onto American soil, crowds cheered. Reporters swarmed. He was the golden boy, the symbol of courage. The nation's son returned from hell. Life magazine put his face on the cover, calling him America's most decorated soldier. But behind the quiet smile was a man who could still hear the screams of the dying when he closed his eyes. He visited his mother's grave in Texas first. She had died before he went to war. He stood there in silence, the medals on his chest glinting in the sun. Then he wept, for her, for his friends, and for the boy he could never be again. In the months that followed, Murphy tried to adjust to civilian life. He failed repeatedly. Crowded rooms made him sweat. The pop of fireworks sent him diving for cover. He slept with a pistol under his pillow. Today we call it PTSD. Back then they called it battle fatigue. Whatever the name, it haunted him. He tried ranching, but the quiet was too loud. He tried boxing, but every hit brought back memories of explosions. He drank too much, slept too little. His war had no front lines anymore, only shadows. Then came Hollywood. A friend suggested he try acting, saying his story was bigger than life. Murphy hesitated, but he needed work. He moved to California, where the lights were bright and the nights were long. At first he played small roles, soldiers, cowboys, silent types. Directors liked his face, that quiet intensity that came from somewhere real. Audie didn't have to pretend to be brave. He was brave, the kind of brave that leaves scars. Then in 1955 he did something no one expected. He starred as himself in the film adaptation of his autobiography, To Hell and Back. The movie told his own story, from a poor Texas boy to the Medal of Honor hero. He relived every battle on camera, the smoke, the loss, the loneliness. And when the film hit theaters, it became a massive success, the highest-grossing war movie in America for 2 decades. But to Murphy, it wasn't entertainment. It was confession. Every scene reopened old wounds. He later said, "I didn't act in that movie, I just remembered." Behind the fame, he remained humble. He visited wounded veterans, donated to military hospitals, and fought for recognition of soldiers struggling with what he called the invisible wounds of war. He spoke publicly about mental health long before it was accepted. By the 1960s, he had appeared in over 40 films, mostly westerns. He was handsome, disciplined, and polite, but the darkness never left him. He battled depression and insomnia for years, often relying on sleeping pills to escape the memories. Through it all, Murphy never stopped honoring the men he served with. Every Veterans Day, he stood at memorials quietly, hat in hand. He never bragged, never sought attention. When fans asked how it felt to be a hero, he would say, "I'm no hero, I just did my job." But deep down he knew the truth, that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was walking through fear and refusing to stop. In 1971, tragedy struck. Audie Murphy died in a plane crash near Roanoke, Virginia. He was 45 years old. The nation mourned him as one of its purest symbols of valor and humility. His body was laid to rest at Arlington National Cemetery, Section 46. His grave quickly became one of the most visited in the entire cemetery, second only to President John F. Kennedy's. Visitors still come. Soldiers, children, veterans. Some leave flowers, others leave their unit patches or dog tags. All leave respect. Today, when you walk past that small white headstone, the inscription reads simply, Audie L. Murphy, Texas, Major, Infantry, World War II, Medal of Honor. No mention of his fame, no list of medals, though he earned 33 in total, including Medal of Honor, Distinguished Service, Cross 2, Silver Stars, Legion of Merit, 2 Bronze Stars, 3 Purple Hearts, French Legion of Honor, French Croix de Guerre, twice, Belgian Croix de Guerre. Each one represents a chapter of sacrifice, a moment when death blinked and he did not. Murphy's story is more than war. It's about a boy who carried the soul of a nation through its darkest hours. A reminder that heroes aren't born. They're built from pain, duty, and love of country. He was small in stature but giant in spirit, and though his heart bore the weight of battle, it never stopped beating for America. He once wrote, "No soldier ever really survives a war." But through his courage, his honesty, and his humanity, Audie Murphy helped every soldier who came after him survive a little better. This was his final victory, not on the battlefield, but in the hearts of those who still stand for the same flag he once fought under. The war was over, but for Audie Murphy the battle was just beginning. He had survived hell itself, the fire, the fear, the endless echoes of death. And now the guns were silent. But silence, for a man who lived through so much noise, could be deafening. This is the story of what happens when the hero comes home and finds that the war never truly ends. It was 1945. Europe was rebuilding from the ashes. America was celebrating victory, and the soldiers, those who made it back, were returning to parades, cheers, and promises of a better life. But Audie Murphy didn't feel like celebrating. He was 20 years old, with more medals than any man in the U.S. Army. Yet inside, he carried a weight no medal could lift. He once said quietly, "I sleep with the light on." The shadows bring the war back. When Audie stepped off the ship and onto American soil, the crowds called him a hero. But he didn't feel like one. In his mind, heroes were the men who didn't make it home. Those who lay buried in the fields of France, nameless in the mud. For a man who had seen so much death, peace felt foreign. He didn't know what to do with his hands, didn't know how to live in a world without orders, without danger, without the sound of distant thunder. He was 21, but his eyes carried the burden of 50 years. When reporters asked him how it felt to be America's most decorated soldier, he simply replied, "How do you think it feels to be alive when so many others are dead?" Murphy was restless. He tried college, but it didn't fit him. He tried normal jobs, but the quiet drove him mad. He had spent years running toward gunfire. Now he was running from his own memories. The nightmares came often. In the middle of the night, he'd wake up sweating, screaming, reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. Today we call it PTSD. Back then they called it battle fatigue. But for Audie, it was an enemy he couldn't outshoot. One day a man named James Cagney, a Hollywood actor, saw Audie's photo on the cover of Life magazine. Cagney was intrigued. He invited the young war hero to California. Audie had never imagined himself an actor. But Hollywood was a place where people reinvented themselves. And maybe, just maybe, that's what he needed. So he went. From the battlefield to the backlot. From mud and blood to movie lights and cameras. At first he struggled. He was shy, soft-spoken, and unsure how to fit into a world of glamour and scripts. But there was something about him. Something real. Something the camera couldn't ignore. His first few films came and went quietly. But then, in 1955, Universal Pictures decided to make a movie based on his life. It would be called To Hell and Back. And they wanted Audie Murphy to play himself. When he stepped onto that set, dressed once again in uniform, it was like walking into the past. He was back in the war, reliving the moments that had carved his soul. Every explosion, every line, every memory, was real. He wasn't acting. He was remembering. He said, "It was like opening old wounds. I never want to go through that again." To Hell and Back became one of the highest-grossing war films in American history at the time. People were inspired. Audiences cheered. The boy from Texas, who once lied about his age to enlist, was now immortalized on the silver screen. But while the world saw a hero, Audie saw ghosts. Behind closed doors, he fought his old enemy, memory. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't find peace. He took sleeping pills to escape the past, and often spent nights pacing alone, haunted by names and faces only he remembered. He wrote poetry, short, aching verses about the war and the men who never came home. In one poem he wrote, "No one left to answer when I call their name. They're gone, and I am alone." He married actress Wanda Hendricks, but the marriage collapsed. He later found stability with Pamela Archer, but the scars of combat never left him. He was generous, kind to veterans, and open about the nightmares he carried. In many ways, he became the silent advocate for the wounded souls of his generation, the men who came back but never truly returned. Audie Murphy received every major combat award for valor the U.S. Army could give: the Medal of Honor, Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, Legion of Merit, 2 Bronze Stars, and 3 Purple Hearts. He also earned honors from France and Belgium, a reminder that courage has no borders. No American soldier in World War II received more decorations, but medals can't protect the heart. And for Audie Murphy, the war never stopped echoing. By the 1960s, he was struggling with insomnia and pain. He used his fame to speak out about veteran neglect, long before it was common to talk about mental health. He said, "I don't think anyone ever really gets over the war. We just learn to live with it." May 28, 1971. A small private plane took off from Atlanta, heading for Virginia. On board was Audie Murphy. The weather turned bad: fog, rain, low visibility. The plane crashed into a hillside near Roanoke. All 6 aboard were killed instantly. He was only 45 years old. News spread across America. The nation mourned the boy who had gone to war and never stopped fighting, not even in peace. He was buried with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery, just a few steps away from the tomb of the unknown soldier. His grave is one of the most visited in Arlington. People still come, veterans, families, young soldiers, to stand before his name and remember what courage looks like. Audie Murphy was not just a hero of war. He was the embodiment of what it means to endure, to stand when standing seems impossible. He fought for his brothers. He carried their memories. And though the medals shine in museums, his true legacy lives in the quiet bravery of every man and woman who wears the uniform. He once said, "Bravery is just determination to do a job that must be done." And that's what he did. From the fields of Texas, to the mountains of France, to the skies above Virginia. Audie Murphy's life reminds us that heroes are not made of glory. They're made of duty, sacrifice, and love for their country. So tonight, when you look at the flag waving against the setting sun, remember the boy from Texas, who became the most decorated soldier of World War II, and gave everything he had to defend the land he loved. This is not just history, it's a heartbeat. It's America. And this was To Hell and Back, the Audie Murphy story. Subscribe for more true stories of courage, sacrifice, and the heroes who define America.